Hi Dhruvji, Rajiv here. How are you?
I'm well, thank you very much.
Very good. I'm glad that we can record this call because these issues actually come up quite a lot in our community, especially for small business. See, big business, if you are Birla or Tata, you can afford to pick up a phone call, make a few phone calls, and get all the information you need. But smaller businesses sometimes hesitate because they can't get proper information about business angles. So, keeping that in mind, I understand that you have a consulting business in India and
That's right.
you do various kinds of consulting. It's a small company.
Mhm.
Um, Now, the question is if I want to expand my business into the United States, what are my options? Correct?
Well, I'll just sort of deviate a little bit. Uh, so my question is A, that I want to move to the US with my family,
Sure.
and B, I want to run my business from the US.
Okay.
And as I share more details about what I actually do, it'll become clearer. Should I do that now?
Please go ahead.
Okay, so I'm basically a consultant, and I provide two kinds of services. A, I do research work. So there are management consulting firms and independent research firms, various kinds of market research firms, clinical research, and so on. And they all have varying requirements. So what I do is, if you think of a KPO or a knowledge process outsourcing firm, we are in the business of providing very, very sort of unique, customized, and difficult to implement solutions. There are lots of companies out there that tried outsourcing, didn't work for them, so they can come to me and I can help them. The second part of my business is where I actually help uh, you know companies across the world, primarily the U.S. and Europe, in selling their products, services, or technology to the Indian government. So that's the liaison service that I provide. And what my area of expertise there is that I can procure anything from any part of the world. So we are actually now considering pitching to the Indian government that they bring us on as procurement consultants. And the other part of that is that we go across the world, we find interesting new technologies. And this doesn't have to be just technology oriented, it could be something to do with medicine, for instance. We actually have a product which is somewhat related to medicine, and the idea is we're going to source it from the vendors and sell it to the government here. So the angle in both areas is that I could live in the U.S. and use that as my marketing hub and providing the consulting services to American businesses who A want to outsource and B want to sell their um, products, services, equipment to the Indian government. Because I have my team here that does the marketing bit. I have my team here that does the BPO/KPO bit. That's a summary of what I do.
What would you be doing in the United States? What activities would you be doing in the United States? Forget about for a moment how you would be managing and what you would be doing on your India side. But within the US, on US soil, what activities other than managing your foreign company would you be doing?
Well, I do wish to invest in real estate. That's one of the sort of the big, you know, ideas that I have because real estate is a big market there. It's a very reliable market, unlike investing in India, where returns are very hard to come by. The market is very bad. It's very unreliable in the sense that there's issues of squatting and
Yes,
conversions and
yes.
all those different issues. So I want to basically move all my operational and investment base to the US.
Let me interrupt you for a moment. Would it be fair to say then um, we want to keep all our options open? When we move to the US, we don't want to say that we want to commit to business X or business Y. It depends. When you come here and look at the market, you might change your mind and decide to do something else.
Well, I might, and it would be a great option if I could keep my options open.
Right.
It would be
What I'm
great.
thinking, the visa that I'm thinking, which we normally recommend to ongoing businesses, is the L1 visa. Let me lay out the groundwork for you.
Okay.
Um, L1 visas were initially started to accommodate multinational companies where they wanted to move, let's say, a manager from India to their US operation. Okay. So, in order to facilitate such movement for large multinational companies, government created this L1 visa category called intra-company transfers. Okay. Now, I didn't want to share my screen with you because that will further slow down your uh, computer. I'm just going to click on our website, immigration.com. And when you look at the recording, um, you'll be able to see. Uh, give me a second.
Sure.
Somewhere I just lost you. Okay. So the L1 visa category is quite well defined in our website. And you will go there when you look at the overview, it describes to you what an L1 visa is and how it works. Okay.
Okay.
I'll of course give you a quick rundown on how it works, but I wanted to point out what is available on our website for anyone to just come and see. It talks about how L1 visas work. There are some videos that we have already done on this issue in the left-hand margin. People can post comments and ask us questions. They have done so. We respond to those questions. And there are other options like looking at processing times, or how much time is it going to take. If you want to know what it's going to cost you, you can click on services and fees. Our fees are all published, so it tells you what it's going to cost. So that is how you get basic information from our website. Right. But for your purposes, to focus the discussion only on you, what is important? Well, the good news is when you have an ongoing business, L1 visas are a great option because they don't require a specific investment amount in the United States.
Okay.
They also don't require that you have to come here and live here all the time. You can come and go as you please. I have mentioned this in earlier L1 visa. I'm a big fan of L1 visas, by the way, because they're not like your investor visas where you've got to put down $500,000 or $1 million. They are not like treaty trader, treaty investor visas where your country, in India in this instance, must have a treaty with the United States, which you don't actually. Pakistan does, but India does not. So this is not a treaty required. On top of that, if you get an L1A done successfully, L1 comes in two flavors. For technical people or people who are dealing with the company's operational aspects, you can look at L1B. But L1A, which is what we are thinking of for you, is for managerial and executive level employees. And if that is processed carefully and properly, it can lead to a very quick green card. You could potentially get your green card within a year. Okay. It is the fastest category for green cards. Okay. So for all these reasons, we really like L1As for running businesses. These are not good visas for passive investments. Okay. And on top of that, remember the business in India and the business in USA can be totally different.
Okay.
So for instance, in USA, it is legal in most states. And again, I would not comment about state law because that's unethical for me to do. But you can check where you are going to go. I'll get into that in a little bit, depending upon how deep you want me to go into this discussion about how to set up a business. But when you incorporate, you could say, what is the purpose of incorporation? You can say all legal business, okay? Or all legal activities permissible, or all activities permissible under law. So that means if you set up a corporation, let's call it something silly like Microsoft. Okay, so let's say you incorporate Microsoft in USA, and it says what is the purpose of Microsoft? Microsoft can engage in all activities permitted under the law, which means you could end up owning real estate and trading in real estate, or doing your own marketing. But there are other issues on the L1A side that we need to get into. But the business can be anything or a combination of anything. Okay. What are the requirements for setting up an L1A? First, your US company and your Indian company must be connected in one of the following ways. Okay.
Okay.
And you don't need to take notes, Dhruvji, because we are recording this. I'll have it up for you by tomorrow anyway. So
Okay.
don't worry about taking notes. Most of this information is on our website anyway.
Okay.
You have to have a relationship between the two companies. How should that relationship be structured? Either one company, Indian company, is the parent of the US company, owns 50.1% stock, or the US company is the parent of the Indian company, owns 50.1% stock, or both companies are commonly owned by a third company, sisters,
Okay.
right? So parent,
Okay.
parent-child, sisters, or what is referred to as affiliates. What is affiliate?
Okay.
Affiliate is when the same stockholders own approximately the same percentage of stock in both companies. So A, B, and C own, let's say, 50, 30, 20. A, B, and C own 50, 30, 20 here as well.
Okay.
Okay. So relationship. Number two, you must have worked as an executive or managerial level employee for 1 year out of the last 3 for the Indian company or outside USA. It can be you could have worked in Pakistan, Ceylon, Europe. We don't care. Outside USA.
Okay.
1 year out of the last 3.
Okay.
Now, this is the tricky part. What is executive or managerial level employee? How is it defined? You see, for big companies, it is easier to prove.
Right.
Because if I'm a manager, I actually manage 10 other managers.
Mm-hmm.
Usually,
Right.
when you manage people and those people are professionals, we can very easily prove that you are indeed a managerial level employee.
Okay.
Remember, if you are a loading dock supervisor, you could be supervising 20 laborers or 30 laborers. That
Right.
does not make you a managerial level employee.
Understood.
Okay. So executive or managerial level employee, one definition relates to the number of people you supervise and what their qualifications are and what their roles are.
Okay.
But this is the second part which is going to be very relevant for you. This part is that you are not managing people, but you are managing executive or managerial level functions.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example, and I gave this example before as well. And I'll give you another example, a case that we just won yesterday. It was actually went into appeal, and we won the case in appeal. Very close to what you do. Only they provide merger and acquisition advice. Okay. So one example is where we have a very large company, but the particular employee for whom we are filing L1A is not supervising anybody. This company has 30,000 plus employees, 40,000 plus employees. They do IT work. They have their own products as well. But this particular gentleman is in charge of the pricing model. So when a project is bid for, he decides what we are going to charge for that.
Okay.
So he moves from project to project to project to project. He doesn't have 10,000 people that he manages.
Okay.
So we were able to win that case because pricing is such an important function of the organization.
Right.
When you are in charge of that, it says a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Second case, which I was mentioning, the issues were a little bit different. But that case, couple of things that were going for us was, you also have an MBA from USA, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, this gentleman also has an MBA from the one whose case, this is the second case I'm mentioning. He has an MBA from Wharton, and he provides trans-border consulting on mergers and acquisitions.
Okay.
We won his case by showing the government the nature of the transactions, the amounts involved, the fact that he'd been doing this for a long time, and that he would not be, what we would call, he'll be not, no pun intended, he will not be chief and Indian all combined in one.
Right.
Okay. In other words, he does just the managerial work. He doesn't answer his phone calls. He doesn't look at his emails. We've got other people doing that work for him. So establishing managerial or executive level function is the tricky part for smaller companies, but it can work.
Okay.
And because the amounts that you lay out are so small, I mean, when you look at our fees, and I have, I'm pointing that out on our website, our fees are listed. You can actually
Yeah,
see
I'm
that,
looking at it.
yeah, the amount is not that big. So for a
Yeah,
very few, a couple of $1,000s, you could
right,
get a taste of whether you're going to win this case or
right.
not. Okay. Uh, Once the L1A is approved, well, before we get there, let me take a step back. One of the decisions we have to make is, are you going to buy an existing business and thereby set yourself up as an existing business, or are you going to set up a new company and set yourself up as a new business? There are pros and cons. If you go in as a new business, government doesn't care about your hierarchy that much. They don't look too much into how many people have you hired. They give you 1 year L1 to establish yourself. Then you have to apply for an extension. By the way, L1As are for 7 years, given in 3 plus 3 plus 1.
Okay.
Okay, and if you have not been in USA for a certain number of days or months, you can add that on to the back end. And of course, in the meantime, if you applied for a green card, then this is not an issue at all.
Okay.
Okay, so new office or existing business. New office advantage, you're not looked at with that degree of scrutiny for 1 year. Bad thing, you only get it for 1 year. So that's another thing that we like. Now, one of the requirements for L1 and EB1 is until the cases are approved for L1 all the way until you get your green card, your Indian operation, your foreign operation must continue to be in business. For you, that's not a problem. Okay.
Right.
So therefore, L1As are a great option for anyone. Um, do you have a general idea of what we are talking about so far? Do you want me to address any particular issue?
Well, I do have a couple of quick questions.
Yes, sir.
So when we talk about the L1, now the L1 is going to be only for me or for my family as well?
Thank you. I'm glad you pointed that out. I should have made that clear. You get your L1 and your family gets L2 at the same time. So all children
Okay.
below the age of 21, and honestly speaking, you look like you're 21 yourself. So I'm
Thank
sure.
you. I'm not.
Um, I looked like I was 81 even when I was 18.
Well, I wouldn't say that, but
So
you know,
going,
I
yeah,
started getting the gray hair, so I find that the gray hair is actually it lends a certain air of credibility to you.
I think I agree with you there. It increases your billable rate.
Right? It does. It does. Yeah. I hope you know.
So the family gets L2. Not only that, your wife is entitled to an employment authorization.
Okay.
And her employment authorization, in terms of freedom, is almost like having a green card. She can work anywhere. She can work as many hours as she wants. She can work for you if she wants. She can not work if she doesn't want to. If she wants to sit at home and watch soap operas, perfectly okay. She wants to work 3 hours a day, perfectly okay. So it's a great option for spouses to have that kind of freedom. Okay.
Okay. I did have one more question. Now, when you're talking to me and a little bit about my background, what do you think the likelihood would be of getting L1?
If
I mean,
I
if I
think
say that
I'll have to.
85, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
We'll have to sit with you and look at your facts and figures, look at your plans
Okay.
realistically. Because look, I I am also a big dabbler in technology, and the lesson I've learned from managing technology for our office as well as just for fun is that before you enter, you look for exit. So if I'm going to adopt, let's say, Oracle database for my office, before I start putting all my critical data into it, I want to make sure that if I tomorrow want to use MySQL, I can transfer the
Right.
data over. Okay.
Absolutely.
And if I can't transfer triggered procedures or stored procedures, or how far am I going to be set back if I'm not able to transfer gracefully? So that's kind of what we would look at for you. We would look at a graceful exit. Before we get you into this process, we would like to discuss with you, and it's not a formal process, it's a very informal discussion, that Dhruv, have you
Right.
thought about what happens if we are not able to get an extension after 1 year? How
Mhm.
will
Okay.
you gracefully exit without losing your shirt in the process? And if you have, for example, bought real estate, how would you manage that? And of course, you can give powers of attorney. You can talk with your local lawyers. That really is not my field, but I can certainly tell you the issues that I can see that should be discussed with the local lawyers wherever you decide to incorporate. This is an important point. In USA, every state has its own corporate law. In India, you have Indian Companies Act. Okay,
Right.
I think 1950 Indian Companies Act, which is the same all over the country. In
Right.
USA, every state has its own law. In Delaware, you can open a company over the telephone. Okay,
I actually have a Delaware corporate LLC.
there you
I've
go.
actually opened one.
There you go. And all you need is a registered agent for a couple $100 a year. They have
Right.
registered, professional registered agents, very competent. They can take care of it for you. So, all in all, opening and closing corporations in USA is is a cakewalk as compared to India, where
Uh-huh.
both opening and closing is even more difficult.
Yeah.
Closing a corporation is a year-long process.
In fact,
Here,
my
you
accountant tells me, let it be. I mean, what's the point?
well,
What
yeah,
if I tell him about?
in USA it doesn't bother you that much.
Yeah.
So, and actually that's another good thing. I was going to make that point. It's a good idea to have a relationship with an accountant. I think you're going to need three kinds of people on your side: a relationship with
Okay.
an accountant, of course, immigration work, and of course, business law. All three areas should be covered. And business law and accounting should be probably accounting. You can be from anywhere, preferably in the same state where you're going to do business. But business
Okay.
law definitely in the state where you're going to do business. So, in a nutshell, that's where things
Another quick question, and this is probably a stupid question, but since all businesses are allowed, would it be feasible if I took my Delaware LLC and I just decided to start investing in personal loans or properties bought with that money?
are. When you say personal loan, means you want to loan your money to people?
Yeah, I mean, and charge an interest for it.
I think I'm sure there may be other kind of laws that would be applicable to it, but I can only address the immigration side of it.
Okay.
Immigration law wise, there is no requirement that your business must be people intensive. Okay.
Okay.
It of course becomes more complicated. It becomes more difficult to convince the government. See, remember the USCIS officers who are reviewing your applications are not necessarily people who are conversant with the latest business practices. Okay.
Okay.
Traditional models they understand. If you have, an IT company in India and an IT company in USA, both doing the same business, very easy to understand. When you get into non-traditional businesses, like I was talking about the merger and acquisitions business, we had our green card denied. We got the L1A, the whole family moved here. When I filed for the green card, they denied it, and I felt that was absolutely illegal. Now, typically,
Okay.
remember, appeals are only 2% successful. 98% appeals
Okay.
are denied. Those are the
Okay.
those are the general statistics on appeals. But I was so confident that we are going to win this, and we were justified in that. We are about to file the green card again because you can always refile. Just
Okay.
because it's been denied once doesn't mean you can't refile. So because the models are unconventional, they get very confused with these models.
Okay.
But anything that you can conceive of as legitimate business requiring some area of endeavor where money is generated because of your expertise, um, chances are you're going to get an L1A. One of the things that I want to mention to you, which is very unique about L1As, is this. Normally, one of the components of an L1A is that you are not engaged in the actual service. You are engaged in managing the people who provide the service. Let me give you an
Okay.
example. So you are not doing the consulting yourself, you are managing the people who are doing the consulting. Or better still, you are managing the project managers who are managing the people doing the consulting.
Okay.
There's no requirement that you can't at least 10, 20, 30% do the same thing. But I mean, you can probably engage in certain amount of consulting, but your work should be managing the consultation. Now, what if you want to engage in, let's say, lending for interest or investing? I don't know. We'll have to think about it and figure out a way to present it to the government um, that makes sense, it's legal, and has a reasonable chance of success. But any business model that you can think of which is legal is certainly worth exploring.
Okay. Okay. I mean, that was my question so far. I mean, I welcome anything you want to ask before I actually wanted to talk to you a bit about the EV2 and the EV5 as well. But those are sort of brief discussion that I just wanted to throw at you.
Yeah, no, I can certainly do the EV2 and the EV5 for you. There's some relevance here about doing business in the USA. Again, I just remind our people who are listening to this conversation that we're not talking about treaty traders, treaty investors, E1, E2 visas, which are available for certain countries where they have a treaty with the United States. We are looking at all the world, options that are available to every country. So L1 is one of them. Uh, I want to address EB2 first. EB2 is normally, EB means employment based and 2 means category 2. Employment based 2. What is that category? It is usually a category available to people who are going to engage in jobs that require either a 4-year bachelor's degree with 5 years of post bachelor's experience or a master's degree. Okay. There's a whole lot of law on what is not acceptable as degrees. But let's leave that aside for a moment. But that requires a job. So EB2 requires that an employer in the United States wants to hire you and they are willing to go through the paperwork for you. And that's called the perm-based process. All that information is on our website as well. And of course, we can go into it in further detail if you want. We can always do a follow-up call. So EB2, that is one prong of EB2. There's another possibility of EB2, what is called national interest waiver. Okay. National interest waivers are very poorly defined. These, I think they were first announced back in the year 2000, 15 years ago. And if I remember correctly, October 2000. So they've been around for, no, actually even older than that. They've been around for a very long time, but they have not been very adequately fleshed out. Okay. So we are still relying upon some rulings from the government that talk about what national interest waivers are not. But they look at 4 criteria. Your work must be intrinsically in national interest, for example, cancer research. Okay. Or you are a turnaround artist who goes into failing industries and turns them around. Okay.
Okay.
2, you must be able to show how you are more qualified or doing more unique work as compared to your peers. Number 3, this is the most difficult one. How would national interest suffer if you were to either not do or discontinue what you're doing?
Good.
Okay. And number 4, which is kind of a marginal thing, why should you not go through the POM process, the normal employment-based process? Government had decided, Obama had said that he's going to expand this category for entrepreneurs. So that's a very legitimate expansion, actually, to say that, okay, if you are going to create jobs in the United States, here are the criteria, we'll give you national interest waiver. National interest waiver for people from India, China, Philippines, and Mexico has limited usability. Why? Because the category is EB2, it's backed up 6, 7, 8, 9 years. So if you apply for green card today, it'll take you 9 years to come to USA. However, Obama government had also said that coupled with the national interest waiver will give you parole. That means even though your green card will come 9 years later, you can start your work today.
Okay.
So instead of creating a visa category like H1 or L1, they'll just parole you. They'll give you permission to come to the USA. But that has not been implemented. That's still very much a twinkle in the eyes of Obama, no more than that.
Okay.
Okay. So EB2 is not a real option. Now, EB5. I like and dislike this option.
Okay.
I like it because it can be relatively pain-free if you meet the criteria. That's probably the only reason I like it. Pain-free if you meet the criteria. However, it can be very painful from many different angles. First, the amount. You've got to invest $1 million or 500,000 in certain selected circumstances. And I'll talk about that in a minute. That 500 you should make it to be about 550, 560, somewhere there. Million, maybe million 10, million 15, something like that. Ancillary expenses. Okay. So the requirement of EB5 are that you have invested the money came from legal sources, and that over the next 2 years, you will create or preserve 10 American jobs, not counting you and your family. Okay. And then if that succeeds, you get a conditional green card for 2 years. After 2 years, you have to remove the condition showing that your money is invested in the jobs that have been created. I'm making it a little simpler than it really is, but overall, that's what we are talking about. Now, you can, and the money must come from legal sources that you have to demonstrate that this come from legal sources. And if you are borrowing, this is something new, there's actually a lawsuit pending on this. If you are borrowing, money must be borrowed against your personal assets, not counting the asset of the business. Okay. So if you have a house in Calcutta, another house in Bandra, Bombay, another house in Delhi, you can leverage them all and get money. That's fine, even if it is personal loans. But if it is a personal loan because I'm your dad and I like you and I want to give you $1 million, they're not going to accept that. This is where the lawsuit is pending, that government is overreaching. They should allow us to use personal loans without any leverage. I don't know where that is going right now. It's still pending in Washington, D.C. Okay, so the 500,000 amount kicks in when you invest in either high unemployment area, what is called target unemployment area, or target employment area, TEA, which is where the unemployment rate is 150% of the national average. And so let's say national average of unemployment is 10%, you are where you are putting in your money, it's 15%. And the money can be, the 15% must exist when the money is invested or when the forms are filed, either one. Okay. Second is if you do it in a rural area, that has certain definitions. Third is if you go through an approved investment scheme, they are called investment trusts or regional investment centers. The reason I don't like these, you have to do a lot of homework, make sure your money is not being put in the wrong hands, because they are not under government control. The approval is only regarding immigration law. It is not regarding their viability as a business or their bona fides or their honesty. Okay. I mean, 150 or so investment schemes have been approved, and not all of them are reliable. We use some, our clients use some, but we tell them, look, we are not investment advisors. You've got to do your homework. We'll take care of the paperwork, but make sure you feel comfortable where you're investing. That's EB2 and EB5, which is the investor visa option. What else?
Well, regarding what you said about the regional centers, I've actually done a lot of searching on EB5 as well. My question is, hypothetically, if I think about a direct investment of, even if it's like $1 million, do I still have to meet the 10 employee requirement?
Here's the interesting thing. I should have mentioned that. If you do an investment, let me rephrase that. The 10 employee employment creation option exists across the board, except in 2 cases.
Sorry, can you come again?
There are only 2 exceptions to the 10 employee requirement.
Okay.
One exception is if you invest with an approved scheme, which is the regional investment centers.
Right.
If you invest with them, they have already given to the government, that's what they get approval for, that if we invest this money, create this project, directly and indirectly will create so many jobs.
Okay.
And the government decides, okay, you are creating 100 jobs, so we'll give you 10 green cards for these.
Okay.
That's the approval. Okay.
Right.
So one exception is these investment schemes. And a second exception is if your investment is what is referred to as troubled business.
Okay.
So let's say you locate a business. If it is in a regular area, you'll invest $1 million. If it is in a rural or target employment area, you'll invest 500,000. As far as I recall, that's the way it works. And if it is troubled business, which means it's lost 20% of its net worth in the last 2 years, you don't have to create jobs. You have to only preserve the jobs.
Okay.
As long as there are 10 jobs. So if it has 4 employees, that won't work. If the business has
Okay.
11 employees and you're preserving 11 jobs, you create more or not doesn't matter.
Okay.
So those are the only two exceptions. Otherwise, you always have to create jobs.
Also, in terms of the regional centers or approved investment schemes, like you said, I saw a few, and I was told that those are schemes which have virtually no return. So we're talking like maybe 0% or 0.5%. Are there conceivably any reliable investment centers which have a fair rate of return?
It's beyond my expertise.
Okay.
Dhruv, I am the kind of guy, my eyes glaze over when people start talking numbers. I'm not a numbers person. So you need to talk with somebody who understands this business or these businesses better. Just from my common sense, some of these schemes are actually run by state governments.
Okay.
So, if the state government is running it, at least there is some sense of confidence that you can have that they're not going to run away with your money.
Right.
Second is if the scheme is based upon ownership of real estate, I know that if I put my money into real estate, I'm not going to lose 100% of it. If I put it in a consulting business, I might lose 100% of it. But if I'm putting it in real estate, so these are some of the things that probably an investor like you can find out. I really have no expertise in investments.
Okay. Okay. I think, and also real quick, when we think, you mentioned one of your sample cases for L1 being from Wharton. Now, is that of any relevance where the person went to school? Does it have to be a tier 1 or does that affect?
No. The reason I mentioned that is that we do make it a point. Look, the USCIS officer who's looking over your application is a human being like you and me.
Right.
If they find that there are elements in this person's background that lend him additional credibility, I want to bring them out. Because remember, a lawyer's job is not just to present your case legally, but also to present your case in a manner that makes it more provable. So there are certain inchoate factors, factors that we don't normally consider as relevant, but which could be relevant anyway because they tend to lend credibility. If you've been in business for 10 years and you've done business with the Indian government, you're not somebody who's untrustworthy.
Sure.
You're the kind of person we want to bring to USA. We want to bring you here. We want to bring your money here. And those are the certain elements. In your case, it may not be Wharton. It's the fact that you've done business with the Indian government. That makes it look good.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. I mean, that's pretty much all I can think of in terms of questions. I welcome any questions or comments that you have, to help the viewers or.
No, I think I cannot think of. Oh, I just want to add a few things that if you want to look at it, you can look at our website. You can look at our LinkedIn page. I have a lot of information there. Anything that I think is relevant for business, in our LinkedIn page, you will see it under various, like we've done other calls where doing business in the USA was discussed. So you can always go to, our LinkedIn page, for example, or our YouTube. All of these links are on top of our website. You can go to our YouTube page. We have tons of information there as well. You can join our community conference calls. We do one every other week, and information is right here on the homepage, immigration.com on top. So anybody who wanted that kind of information, we really, I think we give away a lot of information. Our entire work was based upon the business model. What can we give away without hurting ourselves? And if we can give it away without hurting ourselves, we will. There's no question.
Well, Well, I gotta say, I'm not one to give off compliments easily, but I found in all my research that your forum and the amount of detail you provide on all of the visas is literally quite unparalleled. And
Well,
especially the fact that you have those sample cases that people can look at. I mean, those alone can help a person decide whether or not they might be fitting into that criteria.
I do like to see. Our interesting thing is, I've been doing it for close to 3 decades, Dhruv, and it still is as exciting as it was from day one. That's one good thing. Part of it is because our clients are very, very smart people. There are people, most of them are smarter than I am. There are people that question us, they work with us. It's not like being a being a driver with a reluctant passenger. These are all, we are like building a team with our clients. Then on top of that, the entire gang here is so involved. I mean, when we lose a case, it is a big disappointment for everyone. And when we
Right.
win a case, for instance, we won a case this morning. I wrote about it. It was a very odd case. Government came and said, "Oh, you committed fraud. You are barred from entering USA forever." And the guy came to me for a second opinion. I said, "I don't see fraud." The government said you have to apply for a waiver. And I said, you can't get a waiver for a fraud that easily. This is a permanent bar from entering the USA. But I think your better legal approach is to say that I didn't commit fraud, which is the truth. Why should there be a waiver? Your finding is incorrect, right? So it took us about a year and a half of struggle. This morning we won the case. So when I I I posted the case and I sent it out to the team. You should see how excited people were, even those who have not worked on this case, because every time we win a case, it's like a personal pleasure. So that's the best thing about, it's not just about making money. We are not cheap. We are
Right.
reasonably priced. We're not cheap, but we do enjoy our work, and I think that does tell.
That's good to know. That's good
Yeah,
to know. I'm just going to ask you one more quick question that just popped in
please.
my head.
Sure.
You did say there is no specific investment amount for the L1.
There is
Is
it.
there any kind of, if I was to weigh the likelihood, would a higher investment amount be more likely to get an approval or less likely?
Maybe,
I or
maybe I would say an amount of investment that is proportionate to what you're planning,
mm,
proportionate,
okay,
and a business plan that is quite clearly showing you as an executive managerial level employee rather than um, a a grunt, so to speak. Okay, if you
right,
are doing routine administrative work, you won't get an L1A. I must also point out to you one case that we lost actually, which is instructive. And I'm very sad to say that those clients did not come back, despite my very strong recommendation that we try again. They had gotten an L1 denial. It's a very unique business model. What they do is they actually negotiate with various teams for sports events to be broadcast all over the world.
okay,
Very solid business model, good amounts of money being transacted. They've been doing it for years. Case got denied. They came to us, or I think maybe at the RFE stage, request for evidence stage, they came to us. I think we made a very solid case, but the case got denied for some silly reason. We met most of the requirements that they had asked for. But the clients, I guess, got discouraged. They didn't come back. That was an approvable case. So the business model can be something truly unique, like this business model. I mean, we don't need 20 employees.
right,
We were able to show, I said, look, here is the executive level experience that is quite clear. First of all, when you go and talk with Redskins, the local football team, you're not talking with their manager. You actually talk with their top level executives. The fact that you're
right,
meeting with top level executives shows that you are yourself an executive. Number two, you are negotiating contracts and you have complete authority from the board of directors to sign away anything you want.
right,
Sign of discretion, sign of executive authority. So, anyhow, the point is you can, if you have a business model that is genuine, that is has investment proportional to what you are thinking. Because if you're thinking of buying motels, I want to see a couple of $1 million in your bank account. Okay.
right.
If you are thinking of starting a consulting business, maybe $100,000 in your bank account is more than enough. Maybe even 50,000 is enough. Maybe no amount is required.
Right.
So it depends upon the business.
Okay. I gotta thank you. This has been very, very helpful. Your idea has been very unique. In fact, I haven't read any, and it does make a lot of sense.
Good.
So I want to thank you for your time, and I want to keep myself open to you. Should you want any information from me, I'm gonna follow up with you once I speak with my family, because this is obviously looking very good, and I might want to start it. So, well, I might want to start it very soon. So, I want to keep myself open to you. Should you have any questions, just shoot me an email.
I will. And Dhruv, also remember that we are going to go into elections next year. And no matter who wins, we are expecting that towards the end of next year, well, not end of next year, but the year after, we might see some major immigration reform. Because if you look at the last reform, there was a huge compliment paid to people with US degrees, people with entrepreneurial ideas. So maybe that same compliment will get carried on to the next term and to the next set of immigration laws that we see. Okay. Good luck. Good talking with you.
Thank you, and I hope to speak to you soon.
Take care. Bye bye.
Every other Thursday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we host free community conference calls. Everybody is welcome to join. Some people post questions ahead of time. You can take membership in our forums. All of the details are there on our website, immigration.com. You can take membership ahead of time, and it's instantaneous. It happens right away. And post your questions beforehand, or you can just log in. The phone number and all are provided: 202-800-8394, 12:30 Eastern Standard Time every other Thursday. We have free apps for both Apple iOS platform for your iPhones and iPads, as well as for Android. Just look for immigration.com, the period dot, and the application should show up.